Hello, 𝐊𝐿𝐴𝐴𝐴 viewers. Today we have invited Madina Kimaro, who is founder of Madina Climatic Organization and is dedicated to advancing environmental protection and community well-being in Tanzania. Hello, welcome.
Thank you so much, Nadia, for having me in this podcast. And as she said, my name is Madina Kimaro from Tanzania. I am the founder of Madina Climatic Organization, a youth-led organization focused on water conservation and preservation and forest conservation. Thank you.
Thank you, Madina, for coming. Madina, you are doing different work in climate justice, in community health, and sustainability. These are three different and very major topics. Was there a personal experience or moment in your life that sparked this deep sense of purpose and responsibility and that led you to this work?
Yes. Growing up in Tanzania, I realized that we highly depend on nature. Looking from our water bodies to our forested areas and even the economic activities that many people in Tanzania depend on are highly affected by the climate crisis. Talking about economic activities including agriculture, tourism, mining, and fishing, we see that these are the four main that many people engage in. Agriculture itself has approximately over 8 million people who depend on it and practice it. And it's also the backbone of our economy here in Tanzania. But also tourism contributes to approximately 17% to the gross domestic product of the country. But these economic activities, when you just sit and reflect and look into them, you see that they are very vulnerable to the effects of climate change, including droughts, floods, heat waves, and even depletion of our natural resources. And so I also saw young girls when I went to Dodoma in 2023 walking a very long distance just to fetch water. And so I realized that climate change is not only about the environment. It's about our dignity, it's about our health, and it's also about our survival. We see that many people globally are affected by climate change in very different ways because climate change affects all of us, but it's not equally. So I thought that why not, as a young girl who has a platform, thought I should use my voice and start advocating for climate change and to show people that it does not only mean that we're talking about the environment, but we're also talking about the children who are affected, the survival, the women who need to skip school to fetch water, and even the men who need to make sure that their families are safe in different vulnerable effects like floods. So that's why I decided to take my time and to invest my energy and my knowledge to advocate for climate action and show why it's important and how we can do it.
Thank you, Medina, for sharing this. And coming from Pakistan, I can resonate to some of the problems that we are also facing, especially when you talk about fetching water, and we have to fetch water. In fact, there are villages. In my own village, we have to fetch water and it take hours. And there are females who are not able to go to schools because they have to take the responsibility of going and fetching the water for the family, both for drinking, for other daily uses. And yes, the men, they also have to travel with them so that they can carry the extra water and they can also make sure that they are safe. Of course, flood is another disaster of the climate change, and there are a lot of important things that are happening. And I do see that Tanzania is a country which mainly their GDP is like 17% of GDP is contributed by the tourism. So when there is a global calamity there, it affects the people livelihood also, because most of the people are connected with tourism. So I deeply understand this. And since you are working directly with the community which is deeply affected by this climate change, and you're very young also, what have these experiences taught you about the strength and wisdom within vulnerable populations that the world often overlooks? Because now you are working directly with the community.
Thank you so much for that question. And yes, at first, when you reach in a village, you see the way they are experiencing those effects, from the deforestation to the droughts and the floods. And when you sit with them and get to experience the effects that they're also facing, you realize that these people are very resilient. They may have limited resources, they may have traditional knowledge, but these people have solidarity that is keeping them grounded to make sure that they are willing and they are able to adapt to the effects of climate change. And yes, it's true that most of the times, not only the global leaders, but even us who are not living in the villages, we most of the times overlook the people who are living in the vulnerable communities. But we need to understand that these people are also climate leaders. And if in 2025 they are still living in villages that are not very much developed, so we can see that they must have traditional knowledge and skills that have been giving them the ability and the opportunity to cope with the effects of climate change and to adapt to the effects of climate change throughout all this time that they've been living in their villages. And we need to understand that they are also leaders. They're leaders and they have rights, and they should also be given the opportunity to speak. And one thing that I would like to say is that we do not need to speak for them. They also have a voice, and their voice is very powerful. But what we can do is to amplify their voices and to represent their stories and to represent their faces and to show the world what is actually happening, and how are they taking this into their daily lives and how they are being able to move throughout.
I agree with you, Madina, that amplifying the voice is really, really important, because not everybody has the same resources. So that's why I agree with you. And also, Madina, would you like to tell me that in Pakistan, when there was a flood, it was a recent flood and it impacted a lot of cities, and people were not able to, they did not like the idea to move from their houses. The government was issuing warnings, although our government is very slow. It is the super slowest government in the whole world as far as the disaster management is concerned. And they issued the warnings until the flood was already there. They were very late. And the people were not willing to leave the leave assets and everything. How do you see, when there is a calamity in Africa, in your country, in your city, are people adaptive to just saving their lives, or they stick to, since you said that they stick to the old time method, they stick to their houses and they say, no matter what happens, we are staying here? And how do you change that?
One
Is that
thing
a
that I
problem
can say
also?
is that, yes, it is a very big problem. What makes people to not want to leave? It's because of the way they feel about their communities. It's not easy to tell a 50-year-old woman or a 50-year-old man to move from his or her hometown that she's been living there since she was 1 or 2 year old. They've been already connected to that community. They feel that's their home. Climate change really takes away people's dignity. Imagine being forced to move out from the place where you've been calling home for over 50 years just because of a flood that's coming. And it's very sad to see that sometimes we don't get the alert earlier that this is coming and we need to be prepared. And I think it's a challenge that many countries globally are facing on how are we prepared before these effects of climate change before we start facing these effects of climate change, and even after we face them, how are we also preparing our communities? And I think this also relates to a psychological point where people need to be consulted, and they need to feel and they need to be told that, hey, this is going to happen and it's very devastating, but it's going to be okay, and this is what we can do, because it's not only one person experiencing it. It's a big group of people. And so how can these people together comfort one another? I remember even in Tanzania, we experienced a very devastating flood, and a lot of people were forced to move from their homes because they're very flooded. And you can see that it was also a very big challenge, but they had to move because the floods came with crocodiles. So we see that's another point of survival. But what we can say is that at least they did get support from the government and from other agencies. And at least it moved them from a certain situation to a better point. But not every community gets this, you see. So we need to set measures on how people will not only survive, but also they'll be mentally consulted, and also to make sure that this does not affect their well-being throughout their life.
I agree with you. And this is what happened in Pakistan very recently also, because the government was not able to give any warnings about the flood. And the people who are living from 50 years, from 30 years, it was not possible for them to leave their houses. And, the emotional trauma also comes with it. And I totally agree with you. And it was really, really difficult. And by the time they thought to move, they agreed to move, it was already very late. And I agree with you. There is government's responsibility to make sure that the warnings are placed in time. You're doing very good work, Madina. And as a young African woman stepping into global advocacy spaces, it's already challenging, I must say. What internal or external barriers have you had to overcome? And what has helped you stand your ground? Because I see you're a very confident, very mature woman.
Thank you so much. And yes, there are several challenges, and one of them are some of them are, is it really your story? Some people might not even believe if it's a story. Some people will say that her story isn't really motivating me, and that's okay because we all have different perspectives. And some people even ask you, did you really experience these effects of climate change that we're talking about? And we need to understand that I may not be facing them as directly as the people in the villages, but we are all experiencing climate change, you see?
Yeah.
And because I have a chance to speak about it in different platforms, why not? You see?
Why
But
not?
also you'll be told you're too young, sometimes you're too local. You see, sometimes maybe people will even discourage you, because one thing about climate change is that not everybody think that it's real.
Yeah.
So that's also a major challenge. Some people might even discourage you to just make sure that you don't keep on talking about the climate crisis, or to even discourage you to not even take action in your community. But what keeps me moving is that I have seen people experience the effects of climate change. I have heard too. And also personally, I have experienced it. And I know my friends who have experienced it. So looking at the stories, my own story too, the story of the people in the local community, because I'm also doing a lot of field work. And so I see and I get to sit with them and talk to them, looking at the children, how are they being affected by the climate change. It gives me hope to keep on advocating for climate change, because if you know you're able to do this, then why shouldn't you? Because I personally, I believe that it's like my mission from when I was born to come and talk about the climate crisis and to take different actions in my community to advocate for change, not only locally, but also globally whenever I get the opportunity to do so.
Thank you, Medina. Having clarity of your mission and vision makes a lot of difference. And you have this clarity, which is why you're able to perform this work. Very great. Medina, could you please tell us that how do you approach the balance between data-driven work like wash systems and forest conservation and the emotional cultural connections that are essential for lasting change in communities?
Thank you. I think one of the challenge when it comes to working with the local community is that most of the times we don't know how to approach the community. We must understand that these issues we're talking about are very, very important and crucial. And so reaching out to a community, first we need to understand how deeply do they feel this situation. Yes, we are provided with data, but we need to understand that data tells us what is happening. But when we go to the local community, they feel exactly what is happening. So we need to understand that these people have had, talking about the projects that I'm running in my organization with my team, we see that the local community have been living in the forested places. The local community either have clean water or they don't have clean water, which is unsafe. So we need to know how will they receive this topic that we are going to talk to them, or how are they going to receive this project that we want to implement. We have the data, yes, but we need to understand that the data give us the project, but we need to make sure that when we reach out to the local community, we make this a lifelong mission. So when we are looking at data which is provided maybe by the Global Forest Watch or that is provided by the worldometer that shows us every single second what is happening in terms of deforestation, in terms of clean water and sanitation, in terms of health and other very important topics. This helps us to know, okay, so this is happening. And then when we're going to the community, we need to understand, so this is what they have been doing, and this is what we can do relating to the data that we have been seeing. And then together, when we connect these, we should know on how we can make this a lifelong mission, not only for us who read the data, but also from the community who the data is collected from. Thank you.
Yes, that approach is very nice to balance, I think, or between the data and the work that you're doing. Madina, I would like to ask you that you're very young. I'm sure you have family responsibilities also. Then you are doing advocacy, and I'm sure you're traveling also because for climate change work, you have to be there in the field and for conferences. How do you manage travel, stress, work? How do you manage you being a leader and you being you?
Yes, it's really challenging, I would say. But one thing about me is that I wouldn't say maybe others will take it as maybe it won't work well for others, but for me, if I want it, I will work on it. And yes, I am a student. I am also a founder of an organization and I'm also a family member of my family. And it's true, sometimes it can be very, very stressful and challenging. That's why we need to always keep our mental health in check. And also for my school, I always make sure that I finish my assignments on time. Most of the times, we usually show our work on social media, but we need to understand that I also have a team that helps keep running the activities even when I'm not there. So when I have different things to do that concern my family or concern my education, my team is always there to help me catch up and to make sure that the activities run smoothly. But yes, it can be very challenging. And I believe that everybody has their own way of making sure that their things are moving. And as for me, I usually make sure that my assignments are completed on time. I attend my sessions. If I can have extra sessions to make sure that I can compensate the ones that I have missed, I will. And also, I have a very good timetable with to-do list.
Thank you, Madina. Your story is a story of resilience where you're trying to study, manage your family, and also doing advocacy for the communities who are facing climate disasters. Thank you. Keep doing this good work. And of course, I will definitely keep in touch and we will very again do another conversation with you for your future work and for your future aspirations. I'm sure it will be great. Thank you so much, viewers. This was Madina, and I will be back with another story very soon.